What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Paper Room Podcast, hosted by our BT Young Adults team. This is a podcast to encourage young adults in their young adult journey to follow Jesus and live faithfully in this culture. Our hope is to share some wisdom as you're navigating major decisions in this life. We love you guys. Hope you enjoyed this episode.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Paper Room Podcast. This is episode 52.
52.
So exciting.
5-2.
And today we're talking about walking in a manner worthy of your calling. Very
That
excited.
sounds so
Official?
King James-ish.
Like King James Version.
Yeah,
That would say walketh
that might have
in a mannereth,
worthieth.
Of your calling is
like Thor.
just adding TH to everything.
Yeah.
But so to get started, I think a good question to get us into it is, how did we know that we were stepping into our right calling?
Man, so one of the things that I always think about when I think about calling, obviously I go by just my experience, my story. I just felt a lot of peace, like right off the bat. Like I knew I was called to ministry, and like the whole like adage is like, I'm called to ministry, but I don't know what to do. And so I just started doing the things that like I know I could do. And so at the time I was like 18 years old. Was going to college already, and then I started working at Camp Zephyr, fell in love with it, and Zephyr was just a place for me that really solidified a lot of my callings, a lot of my kind of steps in what God wanted me to do, and I still didn't know what the future looked like, but the more I just kept stepping, the more peace I felt, and the more different opportunities I was able to do, lead a small group, lead a devotional. And it just really felt natural. And even at the time, like I didn't even know like really what spiritual gifts were, because you have like apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, teachers, and I didn't really know that what I feel now is like one of my spiritual gifting is teaching. And so I just like, it just felt natural. And I think
You didn't think you were doing nothing different.
yeah, kind of, but also was like behind, like what am I gonna do? How am I gonna make money?
Yeah.
And so but things where it's like, okay, this feels good, this feels good, this feels right, and it was just like continual steps to where now I kind of feel like, okay, cool. And then I think as I was able to keep doing that, I think my vision grew a little bit to where I felt more comfortable like stepping out in more uncomfortable spots and those sort of things. But yeah, I'll say this too. Which I think I've talked about this before. One thing that you've said in the past, like if you know you're called to ministry, like go do something else. And if you're not like joyous or happy, then you kind of know you're called to ministry.
Yeah.
You said something to that effect. And so I remember like one of the things we did when we moved to New York is we worked in coffee, and I loved it. Like working at a coffee shop was so cool. But also like there's so many days where I was like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
And I think that was even more clarity of like, all right, like while I was doing ministry things, I really felt called to like vocational ministry.
That's something similar. Like I felt like Freddy Krueger hands all on the inside. Like if I was not doing what I'm doing now. And I think I could do a lot of things. I don't mean this in a bad way, but like, I have gifts. I have a lot of gifts. I think I can do a lot of things. But one of the things
you could be on The Voice right now.
Yeah, about that. God shut that door. No, about what I think about calling though is more than just outward results, and it's inward formation. When you look at the scriptures, everybody called by God, it wasn't just about what God wanted to do through them.
Yeah,
it was about what God wanted to do in them. So
on,
here's
Jeremiah.
how I knew kind of, that I was stepping into my calling. The doors that I would walk into that God would open up, it would be more work in me than even sometimes the fruit I would see through. You know what I'm saying? That's how I knew. Like even now, like the stuff that I'm doing, God is working in me more than sometimes I feel like I'm working for him.
That's good, because I think one of my buddy Luke Lazan says it's incredible how much ministry you can do on your own strength. So it's like we, especially at BT, we have so many talented people And it's so easy to just leave the spirit at the door and not allow God to do something in formation inside of us. But I do think if we're walking our calling, while part of my story, I feel like it just seems so natural. It doesn't mean it was easy, right?
No.
Like it was like every time I get an opportunity to speak, I feel like still that nervousness in my gut, like, and I wish it would go away. I prayed for it to go away, but I just think God's like saying, hey, like this is me, like this is not you. And so there's that formation inside. I love that you brought that up. That's so good.
Yeah. So that's, and then, one of my prayers, and this is a prayer that I pray often, like, God, if this is you, like, I pray that you open every door.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's not you, slam the door with my foot in it.
Mm-hmm.
Cause I'm gonna go,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to make it obvious that it's not you. So that's kind of that's how I know I'm walking in my calling. When I get to that point, to where I'm like, you know what, I'm still gonna go, because I feel like this is. And there have been times where God has slammed the door with my foot in it. He even did that to Paul. Paul tried to go preach certain places, and it says the Spirit of Jesus.
He tried going to Jerusalem.
Yeah, I mean, he says no, like, So I think that's a real reality when you're pursuing your calling and wanting to walk in a manner worthy of your calling.
For sure.
Be ready for the no's and the slam doors with your foot in the door.
That's good. For sure, for me, it was like peace and then confirmation from people. Because I remember when I was figuring it out,
of the body,
it's so huge. I was between being a speech pathologist and being in ministry, and I also didn't know what being in ministry looked like and what I wanted to do. And I just kept going back and forth, and everyone kept saying, like, you can do both things. Like, both things are great. And certain people tell me, like, I really feel like you have a calling in ministry, and other people tell me, like, I really can see you as a speech pathologist. So I was like, okay, great. Like, what am I supposed to do with this? But it wasn't until our trip to Dallas that I really feel like the Lord that whole trip was orchestrated for a reason. And I never knew that being a young adult, like, women's leader, like, was an option until that trip. And I just felt the Lord tell me so strongly in that moment, like, this is what I've been waiting for you to do. And I remember the preacher that day was talking on Psalms 23, which I've heard my whole life. But I think that day it hit more, and it's now become like my life verse, for real, of like, he is leading us, and he's going to lead us.
Timothy Atik.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
It was so good. And like leading us into the right path for his name's sake and what that looks like. And right after I made that decision, I got so much confirmation from people. Like, literally in the van, I told Danny and Isha, and they're like, yes, like, duh. And so many other people. And peace with that is, I remember I got accepted in the speech pathology program, and I got anxiety because I didn't want to accept it. And so in that moment, to me, it was like, this should be a good moment, but I'm not celebrating. Instead, I'm filled with anxiety because I don't want to accept it. But the internship opened, that gave me so much peace and joy from the Lord of like, you should do this. So it was like I had two different choices to make, but one brought anxiety, one brought peace.
That's so good. I have a question that I would love like your perspective on that. I just find it so interesting because I do remember that part of your journey. And when you're a young adult and you're, 19, 20 years old, going through school, a common question is, what are you going to do with your life, right? And everybody needs to have an answer.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the culture that we live in. And so, because I do remember you saying like, oh, I want to be a speech pathologist. Like, that was your set answer.
Yeah.
And it's good. Like, you have a vision, you have a goal. But I think internally for so many people, like, you don't really know what you want to do.
Yeah.
But you feel like you have to have an answer to what people are asking. Why do you think young adults wrestle with that? Like, to have an answer? And how can we get to a point where like it's cool to say like, I don't know, and be good with that?
Yeah.
I think one thing for sure is pressure from high school.
Okay.
Like, I remember counselors telling me so much, like, it started from middle school, of like, you already need to know what you want to do for your life in middle school, because high school is going to prepare you for that. So middle school, I'm already thinking through what I want to do for the rest of my life. And then high school hits, and I'm still thinking through this because I have pressure from colleges applications of like the program I want to choose, from teachers of like, you need to pick what you want to do. There's almost like this innate feeling from such a young age of you have to know what you want to do by the time you literally hit like middle school, because of that preparing you for college.
You didn't even know your middle name yet.
Exactly. Like, and I now look back, and whenever I am students or young adults, like, I find it so dumb because I changed my major probably like 5 times.
Yeah.
And I also felt such a pressure when I would tell people and they'd ask me what I want to do. Like, I remember I felt embarrassed when I switched from speech pathology to ministry, because like, I had to tell all these people that I told I was doing something that I changed. And my mom was like, but who cares?
Right.
Yeah,
Like, it's what you want to do. And so that's,
thank you, Julie.
for real, shout out Julie.
I love her.
We love Julie. But I think it's like at the end of the day, like who are you standing in front of? Like God or all these people?
That's
And
good.
so if you feel confident and from the Lord of like what you're healing, then walk in confidence of that. And also even after like graduating college, people are gonna ask you like, okay, now what job do you have?
Mhm.
And I remember I didn't know like what job was opening up. So I would just tell people like, I don't know. Like I'm just walking with the Lord and he's gonna open doors, he's not gonna open doors. But I just have a peace knowing that like this is what I'm called to do.
I love that.
And you can just give a simple answer. Like I feel like we owe people explanations or have
right.
to overcomplicate something, but you really don't.
No.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, if you're confident with the Lord and you got your answer from him, like how you decide to answer that is totally up to you.
Yeah, I
Like,
think. Oh, go ahead.
Disciples didn't know what they were doing for 3 years. They were just following Jesus.
Yeah, but some of
Yeah.
them was already fishing. I mean, this is not a pushback, so don't hear it as a pushback. I think this is I'm always now I'm kind of on the other side of conversations that I used to be. I have a different seat at certain tables now, and I'm all for not putting pressure.
Right.
I love that. I think sometimes what's behind it,
Mm.
those type questions, is the characteristic of commitment.
Mm.
What are you going to commit to?
Yeah, that's good.
For sure.
And as a father now of a daughter who's getting ready to be, she's already high schooler, but I'm about to be, having some of these conversations.
Mm.
More than career advancement, I am looking for character development. And I think just as young adults, as you navigate this life, see, one thing about you that I applaud, Megan, is you don't have commitment issues.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying? Even though you were wrestling with you call it, whatever you were gonna do, you were gonna be committed because you were already
Right.
committed to the Lord.
Mm.
I think some of these jokers, they have commitment issues
Tell them.
Mm. That's good.
and they not committed to anything. So you jumping around. I hear now I'm sounding like the old guy in the room. I'm not. I'm in your corner. I think that's the thing. Don't worry about career advancement. Focus on character development.
That's good.
And develop the characteristic of commitment. Because you are gonna have to plant your flag in the sand on something.
And let the career advancement come.
Yes.
Yeah, if that's the fruit that God has for you, let it come.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
it's
good.
like I've been doing this. Like now I look back, I've been in ministry all of my adult life. I don't know how. It's a miracle. But I've been committed to this though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like you've been committed to this. When you were at Zephyr, you weren't really sure,
Right.
but you were committed when you were at Zephyr.
And yeah, that's actually a really good point. One thing I didn't really get into is like when I was at Zephyr, my thought was I'm gonna work here forever.
See?
I love Camp Zephyr. I love this place. It's been formative for me. I can see myself being like a steward, like the guy who was the director, Summer's uncle. And I was like, I can do that.
You were committed there.
Right. And then, but once I felt a calling to the first church I got an opportunity at,
You were committed there.
then it's like, all right, Zephyr, bye.
Tyreek.
I'll see you later.
You were committed.
And then kind of like the anxiety thing that you were feeling is like, because I did both for a moment. It was about a 30-minute drive to that church, and I was working at Zephyr, working at that church part-time. And every time I was at that church, I felt like, every time I was at Zephyr, I felt like, man, I really want to be at that church. Like, I need more time there.
Mm.
And I just kept, and that's how I knew, like, okay, maybe you're called here. Like,
That's good.
Step more into that.
And I think to tie it all together, I think that's really good, Megan, because, what y'all saying, pursue peace-filled commitment,
Mm.
good.
not anxiety-inducing commitment.
Yeah, that's really good.
When you got accepted to the speech pathology program, you start getting anxiety. If you said yes to that, your whole process would have been filled with anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? And I'm sure you would have committed to it because that's just how you were raised. You got good stock.
Yeah.
But you're committed to ministry.
Mm-hmm.
You work hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you grind here, but pursue that peace-filled commitment.
Yeah.
I don't know how we got on this conference.
No, but it was
That was
good.
good.
Like you're pursuing your calling over pursuing your you're pursuing your calling over pursuing your career. Like what the calling the Lord has given you, like you're going to pursue that wherever you're at. Like where that's Camp
Yeah.
Zephyr or a church, but you're not stuck on the career of just being at the
Mhm.
at the church level, which is good.
Mhm.
But so where all this came from is Ephesians 4 verse 1. Therefore, I, the prisoner of the Lord, urge you to walk worthy of the calling you have received. And then verse 2 says, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, making every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. So how do we walk in a manner worthy of our calling? Like, how do we actually put this into application?
That's very good. I think that it's gonna sound
With
simple.
humility, patience.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Which
Verse
is
2.
the fruits of the spirit also,
Yeah.
which is interesting.
I was, to walk worthy of your calling. Walk closely with the one that called you.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't walk closely with God without humility,
Mm-hmm.
without patience,
Mhm.
without, that in my mind, that's what. Because I'm no expert in this. I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I was in ministry for a long time before I even went to seminary. Like, you know what I mean? I was like, who was listening to me all them years? You know what I mean? Like, so to walk worthy of your calling, you gotta walk closely with the one that called you.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not about your calling.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know calling is a noble thing, but it's not about. It's not just. Let me say that. It's not just about our calling.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's called people that forget the God that called them.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Where does that leave us?
Yeah, as you just reread that, the verse or the word that stood out to me was patience.
Woo!
Like, in a culture of speed, in a culture of fast, in a culture of I have to know what I'm gonna do right now because I have to give an answer to everybody asking me.
Yeah.
The word is patience. Like,
Yeah.
when you're walking with patience. Like, I forgot who said this, but
If it was good, it was me. No,
probably,
I'm
yeah. The average speed that someone walks is 3 miles per hour, right?
Oh, wow.
Anything before that, you're exerting a lot of energy. Anything under that,
I heard Rich Viola.
you're actually not
talk
walking
about
at all.
something like that.
I don't remember where. I listened to way too much content, but so shout out whoever said that. But and then when they said that, I remember thinking, like, when I would do treadmill runs and walks, I always walked at 3 miles an hour. Like, and that just was my natural. Like, this feels good.
Your
like,
rhythm, yeah.
And I just thought that was interesting. And I love this verse and bringing it up. One thing that Grant does say, Grant Skeldon from Think, is that so many people are running in the calling that they have rather than walking in calling that they have, or so many people are running in the calling that their friends have. And it's that okay, I see you doing this, I'm gonna go run and try to catch up to you because you're where I want to be.
Yeah.
And our temptation and our feeling is more to be where somebody else is versus being next to the one who called you, like you talked about.
I looked at like some of my friends, and early on in my ministry, I was a part of a church, a small church. God allowed me to pastor that church. And we're trying to grow. And then a lot of my friends at the same time, they're starting to plant churches. And so, all right, Nick, maybe you need to be a church planter. And God shut every one of them church planting doors. I'm not a church planter. You know what I mean? It's great for them. That's what he called them to do. I ain't a church planter. And he made that painfully obvious. But just looking back on it, like you said, I could have ran and exerted a lot of energy and effort trying to do something that I was not called to do. And it would have, I think it would have stifled the spirit and frustrated my life.
Yeah. And I just think of the disciples, man. They walked with Jesus for 3 years and then they got their calling.
Yeah, that's
You
good.
will be my disciples, right? You will be my witnesses,
yeah.
right? And man, like, for young adults who are wrestling with what God wants you to do, like, have you walked with God for 3 years on that?
That's good.
And then see what God says.
I think humility is huge with this. Like, when I was processing writing down, I was thinking of just like the verse in Luke chapter 14. It says, "For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and the one who humbles himself will be exalted." I think the Lord really cares about our heart and whether it's full of humility or pride. And humility also keeps us content, but pride leads us into comparison because we're like, well, I should be there. I've done this so long, so I should be there. And then you forgot what your calling was because you're focused on someone else this whole time. And I remember when I first started ministry, like my internship, I feel like pride came so fast to me. And it wasn't ever anything I ever struggled with. I feel like that's just something like the enemy used.
Yeah, it's an occupational hazard in ministry.
No, it really is, because you're getting all this like telling, when you speak or whatever, you're getting all this, encouragement, which is a good thing, but
It's my least favorite thing.
quickly it can turn to pridefulness. And if you're not careful, you can let that stir into your heart. But it's a constant thing of reminding yourself that you're here just for the Lord. And so I think like a practical thing of when you're walking in your calling is you're reminding yourself where you were, how you got here, but also complete dependence on the Lord, of taking those thoughts captive. Anytime you get a thought that is not full of humility, not full of gentleness, and not bearing of love, submit that to the Lord and give that to him versus allowing yourself to feed on that thought.
That's very
Because
good.
the more you allow yourself to feed on that thought of, oh, well, I should be where they're at. Like, how come that person has this platform and I don't?
That's very good.
Or
you
how-
don't have to believe every thought you think.
1,000%, because not every thought is from the Lord.
That's
And
right.
which is why it's so important to be in your word, because then you decipher and discern, okay, this is from the Lord or this is from the enemy. This is what the enemy is using to trip me up or
and
not.
you touched on it too, that affirmation of the body.
Yeah.
Like if you feel like you should be preaching and ain't nobody around you
Listening.
you know what I mean? Maybe two things. Maybe God doesn't want to use you in that specific vineyard,
And that's okay.
and
Yes.
that's okay.
It is.
And you need to go somewhere else where you might can contribute more, or maybe you're not gifted in that area where you think you
Mhm.
gifted.
And that's one of the problems, and we talked about this too off podcast, but we have glorified the platform of preaching,
Yeah.
right? And so now we think that maybe we say it, we don't say it, but every other service opportunity in the church is less than, right? But it's not. Like,
No.
they're not. And it's funny because you brought this up, Ephesians 4 verse 1, walk in a manner worthy of being calling. Just a couple of verses after that, it goes into what we already talked about with spiritual gifts. Some of you are going to be apostles,
Yeah,
prophets,
yeah.
evangelists, shepherds,
Yes.
teachers. None of them are greater than the other. They all
Yeah.
work together for the growth and edification of the church. But what you have to do to walk in a worthy of the calling that you have, that God has called you to do, is take the time to figure that out. Like, what am I when it comes to the spiritual gifts? Because it does say, I can't remember how it's worded in Ephesians 4, but God has gifted each and every one of you something.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than complain about where you're not, rather than compare who you're not, take time to investigate like who you are, who
That's
God has
good.
wired you to be,
Yeah.
and that takes humility, that takes patience.
Yep.
And when we take the time to do that, then we're able to figure out, okay, God, this is how you wired me to be. Now this is how I'm going to walk and step in.
And you don't walk nowhere fast,
Mhm.
like you said. You know, you don't walk anywhere fast. When you're walking, it's going to take what it takes.
Unless you're walking in New York City.
Well, that's different. Yeah.
And I think also like being intentional about
That's true.
figuring out what you're called to
Speed
leads you to be leads you to be contentful. Because when you're figuring out and then you realize like what you're supposed to do, then that leads you in content to be full of happiness in order to keep doing what you've been called to do, because now you know from the Lord this is what you want to do. But that only happens when you're focused on your relationship with you and the Lord and not letting other voices in your ears except God. And I think like as a church, almost in the influencer world, we've almost like put the work of God into categories of like, this is small work and this is big work.
Say it.
And the Bible never says that. Like he never says that, well, this is bigger work and this is smaller work. Like he talks about having a servant mindset.
Well, as a matter of fact, when in the New Testament, when Paul is talking about the body, he's saying those places that we deem as less honorable,
Mm-hmm.
we need to give more honor to them. You know, so that's very good that you say that.
Yeah, and I think that like can come to your calling, because it's like when you walk in what the Lord has for you, you can almost think, well, how come my calling feels less than in others? Or how come I'm getting less applause than others? But that's something that the culture has made us think. That's not what the Lord has ever made us think. You know, he calls us worthy. He calls us to be there for an opportunity such as this. You know, you've been placed there for the time. And if no one else knows the fruit you produce, or even if no one else knows what your calling has led to or the seeds it has planted, the Lord does. And honestly, that's all that matters at the end
he'll
of the
honor
day.
that.
I want to end with this. One of my favorite characters in the Bible is a guy named Ananias. Acts chapter 9. We don't know anything about him before then. We don't hear about him anything after the book of Acts.
But he had to go lay hands on.
But he had to go, his specific calling was go pray for this guy named Saul.
Yep.
Right? Go pray for him. That guy is going to be an instrument.
Like, God, are you sure?
Right. And Ananias didn't want to do it because Saul's reputation was that of a persecutor of the church and persecutor of Christians. And he's like, you want me to pray for this guy? But that was his only calling. Like we don't know if he did it. We don't know if he discipled
Right.
more people, prayed for
Right.
more people, nothing. All we have to read from scripture is that he went and prayed for Saul, who we know as the Apostle Paul,
Yeah,
who was the greatest missionary of all time.
that's awesome.
And so rather than like, maybe we want to be the Paul, we want to have the biggest platform, have the plant the most churches. I don't think Paul even cared about that stuff. He just wanted more people to know about Jesus. Maybe your calling is that just to pray for someone. Like we we need to praise more of the Ananias types of the church.
Yeah,
That's
that's
right.
good.
Lift them up, raise
That's
them
the
up
truth.
in that calling, because that's important too. Like who are we praying for that could potentially be like the
That's
next
important.
Mm.
Period.
generational leader?
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
Incredible. Man,
That's a good episode.
woo, worthy of your calling.
52.
That is.
52.
I pray that y'all would just grind in figuring out who God has called you to be.
Mhm.
Yep.
Love you guys.
And we want to journey with you. If you have prayer
We do.
requests, hit us up. Also, like, subscribe, and rate us on
Do that.
wherever you listen to this podcast.
Oh, slay.
Last thing, we want to journey with you. I'm glad you said that. If any of y'all, especially if you're listening, you're part of YA, obviously, and you just have questions about like your calling, hit us up. We love to just talk to you and share any wisdom and journey from our journey that we have. So,
Yeah.
love you guys.
Yay.